Meeting of the 2022 Board of Supervisors organizational meeting to order. And in keeping with history, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first item on the agenda for the organizational meeting is the election of officers, and the first item is the 2022 Chairman of the Board. So,
Mr. County Administrator,
yes, sir.
if it pleases the board, I'd like to do number one and number two at the same time.
All right.
Is that okay? Is that okay with you, Mr. Conwell?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to nominate Mr. Ernest Palin as chairman and Mr. Jason Bellows as vice chairman.
All right. Are there any other nominations? All right. As seeing none, all those in favor of Mr. Palin serving as 2022 chairman and Mr. Bellows serving as 2022 vice chairman?
Don, let's vote on them separately because some board members may wish to abstain.
Okay. Good point. Always follow the county attorney's advice. We'll vote on the chairman first. All those in favor of Mr. Palin serving as 2022 chairman of the board, please say aye and raise your right hand as well.
Aye.
All right, that's unanimous. All those in favor of Mr. Bellows serving as vice chairman for 2022, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
All right, both of those positions are unanimous. The next item on the organizational agenda is scheduling your regular monthly meeting dates for 2022. You have that in your package. Usually, the meetings are scheduled for the last Thursday of every month at 7 p.m., with the exception of November, which is on the third Thursday due to the Thanksgiving holiday, and December, which in this year will also be the third Thursday because of the Christmas holiday. Is there any discussion on the proposed meeting calendar?
Don, are you the chairman now?
Well, I mean,
I'm just messing with you.
yeah. This is what we did last year, so I was going to do that. Any discussion on that?
Mr. County Administrator, I move that we accept the schedule as proposed.
All right. Motion's been made that you accept the proposed regular monthly meeting schedule. All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
All right, that carries. The next item is appointments, and because we have two new board members, I'm going to run through these individually, but I'm also going to make the assumption that whoever the current appointee is willing to serve again. The first item is the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission makes recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on zoning ordinance changes and land use issues, and maintains the adoption of the comprehensive plan and the capital improvement budget. The current representative is Mr. Lee, and like I said, I'm going to assume that he would be willing to serve again. Is that correct, Mr. Lee?
Yeah.
Any other?
Somebody else wants.
Yeah. Any other? Anybody else want that position or have interest in it? All right. Mr. Cornwell, can we go through the whole slate and then have them adopt them all at once?
Yes.
Okay. All right, second one is the Planning District Commission. The PDC helps us with regional coordination of state and federal programs, and Mr. Bellows is currently the president of the PDC, and the current representatives are Mr. Bellows and Mr. Larson, who is no longer a board member. So I'm assuming Mr. Bellows would like to continue. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we need one other member.
I'll volunteer for that.
All right. Any other interest in that one? All right. The Bellows and Palin. Social Services Board. That current representative is Mr. Palin. I'm assuming he's.
Sorry.
No. Any other interest in that? All right. Emergency Services Director. That kind of oversees our emergency services department. The emergency services director will sign local declarations of emergency prior to them being fully approved by the Board of Supervisors at their next meeting. I don't know, Chief Smith, where is he at? Is he, anything else that the Emergency Services Director would do other than that?
Primarily, make decisions on behalf of the board before a full meeting.
Okay. Dr. Westbrook, who's no longer on the board, was the Emergency Services Director, so we need,
I would nominate, Mr. Bill Smith.
I will take it, with the understanding I'm work in progress here, so I'm a quick learner, though. I'll take that on.
okay. All right. The next appointment,
Just to that,
okay.
Please object.
The next one is the Historic Resources Commission. That's really not a whole lot of work involved with that one. The Historic Resources Commission right now is lacking a quorum of membership, and it hasn't met it had not met for several years. It met several times here recently, but not a whole lot of work involved with that one. And again, Dr. Westbrook was the representative on that one. Any interest?
Bill Smith.
For that one, too?
Any other interest in that? Mr. Smith, you agreeable to that?
Because I have a choice, yes. I'll take it on.
VACO representative, VACO lobbies for counties at the state level, and Mr. Bellows is president-elect of VACO, so I'm assuming that he would like to have that again.
Makes the most sense.
Yeah, and no other interest, I assume, in that. Finance Steering Committee, that is the chairman plus one other member. So that would be Mr. Palin and another member. The current prior member was Mr. Larson, and he's no longer on the board. And,
I nominate
Craig Geeson.
all right, any other? All right, Craig, you good with that?
I'm good with that.
All right. And Rappahannock River Basin Commission helps with the State Water Board, and Mr. Bellows has been the representative on that, and I'm assuming he is willing to.
I'm the current chairman, so I
Current
guess I
chairman.
should stay.
That makes that decision easy, I believe. All right. Northern Neck Chesapeake Bay Region Partnership is a subsidiary of the Planning District Commission. Has a lot to do mainly with public access, and current representatives were Palin and Lee. Mr. Palin has become one of the appointees to the Planning District Commission, so, I mean, there's room there for someone else. I'm assuming Mr. Lee would like to continue on that as well.
Yeah.
So do we have another interest in that one?
I would nominate Bill Smith.
Are you guys serious?
Is that acceptable to you?
Sure.
All right. All right, so that will be Smith and Lee. The Bay Consortium Workforce Development Board, that is the chief local elected official, which would be the chairman, so that would be Mr. Palin on that. And last but not least is the liaison to the Broadband Authority, and that had been Dr. Westbrook. And I think Mr. Geezy's interested in that.
I would
Yeah,
nominate Craig
and
Geeson.
I think he's gotten his feet wet with some
All right.
people already with that.
All right. All right, gentlemen, if you would, just
I move
please,
that we approve that slate.
all right. All those in favor of that, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
All right, motion carries on that. The next item, gentlemen, is your bylaws. You have to reapprove these, readopt these every year at your organizational meeting. Last year, there was a change on page 2 where you added a paragraph to allow no more than one of your members to participate electronically in meetings, of course pursuant to Code of Virginia 2.2, 3708.2. And you also made a change on page 4 where you added old business to your meeting agenda. Last year was the first year you had done that. Previously, old business had been taken care of in the consensus consideration, board reports, and county administrator reports. So do you have any,
I'd recommend changing the old business, taking that back out, and we handle that through the board reports and the county administrative reports. That's what we've been doing for years, except for last year.
Is there, is,
I put that before making motion.
Why did we switch?
It was,
Because of COVID or?
no.
Okay, okay, I don't need to know then.
any motion been made to remove old business from the meeting agenda portion of the bylaws? Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Raise your right hand. All right, that passes, okay. I guess, give me a motion to approve or readopt the bylaws as amended.
So move.
All right, all those in favor of readoption of the bylaws as amended tonight, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
All right, all opposed, that's unanimous, that carries. The last item under the organizational meeting is your strategic plan, which was adopted in February of 2019. Last year, we brought this to the January meeting for you to consider. It was decided that the work of the Community Business Relations Advisory Committee may alter this and revise it in the future, and you pretty much adopted it as was. Is there any discussion on revising this now, or do you want to readopt as is?
I think we're in the process, still working through that with the business, so I would move that we adopt it as presented tonight.
Yeah, I agree with that, because we're gonna come back later and change that in.
Yeah.
Okay. Motion's been made to adopt the strategic plan as written. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. All right, that is your organizational meeting. I'm going to hand the gavel back to the chairman.
All right, thank you, sir.
Mr. Gill, do you think, I don't know how familiar the two new board members are familiar with the Community Business Advisory Committee. Are you all familiar with that? You know, we just made a statement here that that committee is gonna make recommendations whether we should change the strategic plan or not, and I don't know whether you all are familiar with that committee.
I can't say that I am now.
Okay. Very briefly, the board appointed several business leaders in the county, I guess a couple years ago now, close to a couple years ago, to get together and create an economic development plan for the county, a vision for 2035. And that group is meeting currently from time to time and coming up with ideas and basically a roadmap of how to, of what they'd like to see. And they've informed the board at least on 2 or 3 different occasions, and the board has concurred with their thoughts. And they're putting together a 2035 vision of where the county would like to be as far as business relations go and supporting economic development, and has strategies and goals and laying out a roadmap for that. And that's currently where that is. And the next full meeting of that board will be February 1st or 2nd. They've broken it out into subcommittees. Some of the subcommittees has been affordable housing, recreation, jobs creation, things of that nature. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the Community Business Relations Advisory Committee has been doing.
Good. Okay. All right, we have one more item. That's Mr. Smith for emergency and medical services fees. Sir?
Can you grab that that handheld? Where is it? No, well, yeah, grab that one. Lane, you still got the handheld? I got the handheld. All right, can you let Matt have it?
All right, so what you have before you is a revived ambulance recovery fee adjustment. Section 49-3 for the county code allows you to adopt the fees by resolution. So really the main goal of tonight is to adopt a non-emergency transport fee, which we previously didn't have. And where this is coming from and why this is before the regular business meeting is because I had a meeting with Rappahannock General yesterday, and they want to act on the current governor's executive order that expires on February 10th, which gives them additional resources to help them out. So one of the primary things that they need assistance with is discharging patients from the hospital back home. Their current contractor is giving them heavily extended pickup times. There's patients that are stuck there, and it just trickles down. And ultimately, it affects our emergency units as well, with them having to wait for beds. So that's where kind of all this come from. And there's a lot of moving parts to putting this together, but step one is adopting a fee for service so that we can bill for this. We had we did one last week. Our current license allows us to do them. We just don't have a way to bill for it. So that's the whole point of this. And you'll see in the resolution, it's under basic life support, not emergency at $400, advanced life support, not emergency level 1 at $500, and then I also added a surcharge of $300. So the surcharge will be added to the level of service plus the mileage rate for non-emergent transports. So that's that section. And the other part of that was, I know we've been talking about since at least before the pandemic about adjusting the rates, our normal rates anyway. So since this was coming for the board tonight, I took the opportunity to do that. So you'll notice the standard operating lines is a $50 increase to ALS 1 emergency, a $50 increase to ALS 2 emergency, and a $1 increase to the loaded mileage rate. Are there any questions?
Okay, any questions?
I move that we adopt the resolution.
All right, you've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Unanimous vote. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
for the new board members, as you know, we Zoom these meetings, and they're available for people to watch. That's why you raise your hand, so they know that you're voting one way or the other. It's not out of, it's not that we don't like you. It's just everybody knows who's voting.
Where's the camera? You got two up there and one.
Now I know where to look.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, before you adjourn the organizational meeting, can I
Yes, sir.
do two things? Number one, we talked about dates for regular meetings. At your regular January 27th meeting, I'm going to propose a budget calendar for you all. I've held the number of extra meetings to the bare minimum to get through this, but you will have 3 additional dates, and I'd like for you to check these dates now because it's easier to, while you are all here together. The first additional date would be Thursday, March the 10th at 5 p.m. Is that good for all of you?
It's good for me.
March
Thursday, March the 10th at 5. Mr.
5 o'clock.
Yes. Mr. Smith, Mr. Geezy?
Yes.
Good, but, okay. And the second of 3 would be Tuesday, March the 29th at 5 p.m.
Good for me.
I'm good with that date.
Yeah, I am too.
All right. And the last extra date would be Thursday, April 14th at 5 p.m.
I'm good.
April,
Thursday, April 14th at 5 p.m.
I can make that work.
April 14th, that's fine.
That's, yeah, just not April 15th, right?
I don't think either one matters.
All right, gentlemen, that's good. That made that easy. So you'll see the full calendar at your January 27th meeting. The last item, and Glenn, if you could put PC2 up on the screen for the audience to see. You have in front of you a draft redistricting map. You know every 10 years we have to do this, and usually it's done by the end of the year, but that's when you get the census data on time in September. We didn't get the census data last year until the end of November. So At your December meeting, you directed me to put together a committee of myself, the IT director, Glenn Rowe, the registrar and the deputy registrar, the county attorney, and then the town managers and town attorneys from each town. And we met on Tuesday of this week, and we played around with the numbers, and we have come up with this draft as our recommendation to the board. And I'm just putting this out here tonight for you all for informational purposes. I'll also add this to the January 27th agenda, so you can give me any comments that you may have, or direct us to go ahead and schedule this for public hearing. You'll see on the map, the census blocks that are hashed are blocks that are changing. And you'll see this is very minimal change in order to keep all of the numbers working. And for those of you who have never been involved with this process, we have to maintain 2 minority-majority districts with right here in these percentages. And these percentages of minority-majority in districts 2 and 4 are very close to where they currently are. And we also have to keep this adjusted deviation within 10%. And we've also been able to do that from a low of minus 3.56 to a high of 5.02. So we're within that 10% deviation. So having said all of that, this is the draft we've come up with. It still keeps Kilmarnock split, but we're able to do that under Code 24.2-308 if the town of Kilmarnock passes an ordinance delineating their districts, their precincts, and their precincts are wholly within county districts. So Kilmarnock will be in the process of passing an ordinance to create 3 precincts. Their first precinct will be wholly within Lancaster District 3. Their second precinct will be wholly within Lancaster District 4. And their third precinct will be wholly within Northumberland District 4. So because they'll have an ordinance in place for that, we will be able to leave Kilmarnock split. So this is our draft that the committee has put together and is recommending to the board. And like I said, this is purely informational tonight, but you'll see it again on January 27th, and we'll ask direction from you, comments and direction at that time. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman,
Yes.
we're going to do the mid-budget review at our January meeting.
Yes.
I think in the past, we've done your evaluation at that same time.
Okay.
I would propose that we do that again.
Okay.
Want to keep Mr. Cornwell's record going that the board does evaluations on a regular basis. I think it's important to provide that feedback.
All right.
Locality in Virginia that does that.
Should we put that in the form of a motion, or should we, consensus is fine?
No, it can be part of a closed meeting at the, I guess we can do it at the end of the meeting. One thing, since you brought that up, the Finance Committee, there will be a meeting at 6 o'clock on January 27th with the School Board Finance Committee to look at the school budget first draft. So we'll probably have to do the evaluation during a closed meeting at the end of that meeting.
So, could you send us the stuff we used last year, the form that we used for you? You still
Yeah,
have that?
yeah.
Or whatever we put on it last year, you can send that copy to
Yeah,
us?
yeah. So
Thank
you want a copy of what you did last year?
Yeah. So I don't remember the exact form we used, so that was a simplified form.
Yeah.
Made it a lot easier for everybody, and
Okay,
I
okay,
think that would be best to use again.
all right. Okay.
Okay. Anything else? All right, so I move that we will adjourn this meeting. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Meeting adjourned. Okay, now we're moving on to our organization meeting, our joint work session.
It's set on the agenda for 6:30.
So, yeah, that's what I thought about. Let me wait. Yeah.
What time was that meeting on the 27th?
It's a Finance Committee meeting at
session as well. Thank you.
This inquiry, Craig.
All right, Mr. Barnes?
What's that?
You just hit slideshow.
Okay. You gonna put PC2 on there, Glenn? Yeah.
Oh, shucks, what'd I do?
I'll start it off well.
It's gotta warm back up. There you go.
All right, cool. Now, I wonder if I can hold that. I might be able to get out of your way.
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
What's that?
Yeah, you're gonna have to have a microphone.
I'll hold this one?
Yes.
And I'll have to put it back in that hole. Yeah, do some push-ups.
Yeah. I mean, I can
Okay.
advance it for you, but if you.
Yeah, like Mr. Palin said, thank you all for being here. We started discussing with y'all the possibility of doing a joint work session like this last year. I appreciate y'all coming out. I think what has happened is, as we've gotten into the solar ordinance, as y'all are aware, there are a lot more projects than we anticipated. They came on pretty fast. I think this is just a chance for all of you all to discuss and talk. I'm going to show you a couple quick slides that I think, especially since we have 2 new board members, just get everybody up to speed on where we are. And also, just speaking for myself, I have a better understanding of this issue certainly than I did a year ago. And a year ago, I had a better understanding of it than I did in 2018 when it first came about. So we're all learning as we go. Luckily, we haven't made any huge mistakes yet, I don't think. But I want to kind of show you a couple things that I've been thinking about and looking at, and then we'll go into it from there. You can go with the next slide, Don. Wonder if
I hit it.
There you go. Yeah. So why are we here? You know me, I always put a movie slide up there. I got it. That's my trademark. I got to do that. You know, Dumb and Dumber. So yeah, why are we here? That's why we're here. We're here to discuss. You can go to the next one, Don. The solar use is gaining speed. The black line that's descending there is coal. Coal is slowly kind of making an exit, and wind is at the bottom there in yellow, which doesn't look like much until you look at 2014 to 2020 when this line ends on this graph. That's basically a quadrupling of use. And as you all know, since then, it's really gone parabolic. It's going straight up. Wind is tremendous too. In some states in the U.S., wind provides a huge amount of power. Not so much in Virginia yet, but as you all know, the wind is being developed offshore. I've heard from some of the wind developers who have talked to me, not about stuff here, but just what they're doing offshore Virginia Beach, that one of those turbines, it's incredible the megawattage that they produce. So it's not going away, and it's continue, that use is going to continue to move to the front. Okay. Yeah, we all know why that's going on. Mr. Smith, Mr. Grazing, you guys are probably familiar with these things as well. Virginia Clean Economy Act and all the federal mandates and incentives. One mandate you're going to hear a lot of that the Planning Commission and the board guys have heard a bunch about in the last year has been the 2030 mandate that the governor put in place on Dominion Power, especially, not so much Northern Neck Electric, but especially Dominion Energy, who provides our main power. They're under this pretty steep incentive to provide a huge amount of renewable by 2030. So they've got certainly a fire under them to get more renewable on the ground, and that's why they're moving pretty fast. Okay, yes, sir. So this is the main thing that I wanted to just show you all in the next few minutes is, and Mr. Davenport and I were talking about this earlier, we've got a lot of competing land needs, and things are changing very quickly. In 2022, who would have thought that this was something that this county would be considering or discussing or needing to wrestle with? Who would have thought that you could take a house and turn it into an Airbnb 10 years ago? That was just not something that happened, and yet in the land use office, we deal with it almost hourly, especially Monday mornings when people want to call and complain about what happened over the weekend. It's just not something the county since the 1600s had to deal with. A tavern was a tavern, a hotel, but now things are fungible. Same thing with all these land uses. They're just as important as they ever were, but now they're really coming together, and your jobs as land managers in this room, that's even more difficult. As Mr. Palin alluded to earlier, it's a serious matter, and it's the decisions that we have to make are more difficult. The project that was just approved, Waller, that's well over $100 million project. Who would have thought that a $100 million project would come to Lancaster County and even really be talked about? A $10 or $15 million project would have been a big deal years ago. So we've got agricultural land, we've got residential land that and commercial expansion for existing businesses and others that might come to the county. You have recreational land needs that also vie for a seat at the table with land use. Of course, utility scale energy development land. Mostly, we're not talking about hydropower in Lancaster County or wind power. This is mostly solar discussion. And everything I will say at this point, everything I'm going to say from here forward is basically Lancaster County centric. I'm not worried about what's going on in Southwest Virginia or whatever, although I will allude to some national and global trends here in a second that I think we do need to keep in the back of our minds. Timber production is still a big deal, a big land use, although sadly not quite the financial driver it was 100 years ago. It was a big, huge driver in the early 1900s, and as you all know it, and I'm going to show you a slide on that in a second, it's really low down on the financial scale now. Transportation and commerce, of course. All right, next slide. We're driven by the comprehensive plan. That's our mandate to be here. And it's something that Mr. Gill, Mr. Cornwell, and I talk about a lot when things are going on, making sure we're in accord with the comprehensive plan. This little blurb there is taken exactly from your comprehensive plan, chapter 1. And basically here, I just bullet pointed it for you. The job is to balance the growth of industries and residential base with the health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, and general welfare of the inhabitants. Some of that, I'm not even sure what that means, but we know that a lot of that language is in the language of our special exceptions. That's in the language of our zoning ordinance. So the comprehensive plan, the zoning ordinance, and the actions of the county, the decisions of the county all need to jive, especially with this paragraph. If you know nothing else, we know that the comprehensive plan is to guide those things. So when we're talking about solar permitting, with regards to the comprehensive plan and with the process, this is the basic flow, and I know I've made this overly simple for some people in the audience, but for some of us, this is a good way to look at it. When a site is going to be permitted for solar, the first thing they're going to do is look to where they would connect to the grid, the interconnection. They're going to do some studies with Dominion or with PJM or both, and they're going to seek approval from those grid interconnection partners. At the same time, they may begin to seek county zoning approval. With projects over 5 megawatts, that may come directly to the board. With projects under 5 megawatts, it's going to go to the Planning Commission first and then to the board. After all that is approved, then you're going to go as a solar developer to the state regulatory bodies and seek stormwater approval. There may be some SEC checks, Dominion and PJM. These first two steps could end up in a failure of the project, because if one or the other of those first two blocks fails, then the project's over. The last block is not likely to cause a failure of the project to actually go in the ground, but it could, but it's somewhat less likely. Yes, sir. Next
Can
slide.
I ask a quick question to clarify
Yes, sir.
something? You mentioned the megawatt capacity and where it goes, so the smaller megawatt projects go through the planning commission and then to us? And the utility scale ones come directly to us?
Right, yeah,
Okay.
because over 5 megawatts, the state code requires them to offer a siting agreement to you all, just like Waller did. And that also allows them to go and bypass the planning commission steps. So by adopting that siting agreement, you are deeming it to be substantially in accord with the comprehensive plan, therefore bypassing the 2232 review with the planning commission.
Thank you, I just wanted to get that out there.
Mr. Cornwell could tell me if you were a really hard-nosed board, if you would could still send them to the planning commission?
Yeah.
You probably could, because remember, the planning commission is always your brain trust. They're like the Jedi of the county. If you need them to figure out something that you guys are too busy to do, you know, you come to a board meeting at nights and it's hours and hours of various different things that a lot of people had no idea a small rural county deals with. You can send some of these major issues to the planning commission to figure out and then bring it back to you. So I would think a project if you wanted to. And if that ever happens, the way that's going to happen is I might bring you a project that I would think comes directly to you, and you say, no, Mr. Barnes, let's send this to the planning commission next month or the month after, whenever you can, and that's what I would then do. So keep that in mind as well. Don't feel rushed. Time is on you. Time is on your side, but as you'll see in the next slide, it's not on the side of the solar developer, which is unfortunate.
One of the things might want to be noted too, the project, the Waller project, they did go to the planning commission and make a presentation, so that happened.
They did.
You know,
Yes.
so-
Yeah, that is
so there's
correct.
nothing preventing them from doing, you know, taking that step.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lee, you're right. And while you're at it, and Mr. Lee, you were part of all those meetings as well, as the planning commission was developing the solar ordinance, the open road renewables representatives were at almost every single meeting for about a year. And you kind of preempted one of the things that I'll say later, but I'll go ahead and say it now, is I think it's no secret in this room that a lot of the thrust behind that solar ordinance being developed was to facilitate the proper development of the Waller Solar One project. I think I'm fair in saying that. And just in case anybody wants to say, well, Brian, that's not fair that somebody got to help push through their own ordinance. Well, I will also tell you, Mr. Cornwell will tell you too, in the code, it says that if there's a use that is not described in a zoning ordinance in a county, and I step in and say, hey, I want to do X, even though it's not a use, you have two options. You can either develop an ordinance to facilitate that, or they can begin to try to push for that use, and then you lose the ability to regulate it. So that's a little wonky, and I probably wouldn't try it, and I bet you it could be legally challenged. But we didn't want to be in that position. We didn't want to be in a position where they tried to rezone 2,000 acres of land to commercial or industrial. I think the way you went is probably the better way to have gone dealing with the situation you had to deal with. It's a clumsy process, and by that I'm not referring to our process. I'm referring to the process where solar developers have to go and get in what's called a queue with either PJM or Dominion, depending on the size of the project. To stay in that queue, they've got to pay money. And while they're doing all these studies, it takes a long time, and these development companies have to front a lot of money and a lot of manpower. They're spending thousands or tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars on surveys and engineering before they ever even get approval by the locality, whatever that locality is. So all these sites are selected, and then you try to permit them, and if it's denied at the end, which is happening statewide, in some cases, all that money and all that resource and human capital is wasted. The other problem I will tell you all with this, and I've mentioned this to a lot of the solar developers, and I know some of them might be listening, so I prepared them for this, that frustrates me as staff, and some of you guys I've expressed this to, is that you're dealing with somebody who's got millions of dollars on the line, and you're telling them, well, no, I have to advertise, or I've got to look into this, or I got to get it's hard to deliver that message. It puts a lot of pressure on county staff people statewide, and I hear this from staff, guys and gals, everywhere I go. We don't meet much face-to-face anymore, but there's still a lot of Zoom calls that we do. And that's what everybody's starting to say is, oh, I hate solar. And that's why. It's this pressure that is there. If you and I were to sit down on the tailgate of a truck and design a system to come up with how Dominion Power can get solar farms figured out where they're going to go on the land, we would not develop the process that they have now. It's really wonky. It's really weird. It's almost backwards. So I'm not allowed to lobby, so if there's any legislators listening, try to change this process. Go ahead. Yeah, the next slide is going to just show you a real quick 30-second thing about the matrix of owners and operators. And this kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. So say you're a guy or gal who wants to develop your property. You're going to deal with a solar developer. That solar developer is going to check with Dominion or with PJM and then with the locality. Or it could start with the solar developer, then find a property owner. It could start with the utility provider and then find a property owner. There's not always a solar developer involved. As you all know, Dominion, under capitalist system, is allowed to be their own developer. They have a whole branch now of their business development team that might go out and look for sites. Generally, they're looking for the larger utility scale sites that are, 1,000 acres or more, at least the way that we've seen now. That may change, but yeah, that's the basic matrix. Go ahead, Don. Somebody asked me a couple times in the last couple days, who's PJM? What is PJM? PJM stands for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland. They were started, I believe, in the 1950s. They have about 2,000, 3,000 employees. PJM is the grid operator. A lot of what they do is with briefcases and offices, but some of it would be actual operation. But they kind of supervise a lot of the utilities, and they identify deficiencies and weaknesses. The idea of putting new power lines over the Rappahannock River and not connecting them to the bridge, putting up the big concrete things, that came from PJM. I found that study back in 2009, 2010. PJM identified that as a weakness on their grid, and they basically can order Dominion to fix that. That was all part of the electrification efforts post-World War II. And so you have these grids. MISO is the other grid to the west. Those grids do connect. If there's a blackout, they can share. If there's major power outages, that's how that interconnected grid works. Go ahead, Don. So just to reiterate, you got your separate land use issues. We've got agriculture, timber, residential, water resources. I'm going to show you a couple quick slides, and I'm just going to flesh each one out because I think we need to think about that as you guys think about where you're going to go next, what you're going to do. Ag, I've got more slides for ag just because it's more important in this county than some of the other uses. And also, it's something that's kind of front and center, especially in our times. You go to the grocery store, it does not look like it ever has in my 44 years. It's very scary. And I'm somebody who comes from an ag background. Increasing drought challenges. U.S. looks like this is projected for 2050, given current rates of climate change. It looks like they're expecting the U.S. to be average 48% coverage of drought. The funny thing is I checked Palmer drought about 2 weeks ago, and we were already at 40% U.S. coverage of drought. So that's not too far off. Increasing population, as you all know, billions and billions of people on the planet to feed. Go ahead, Don. Right. And you can actually click through the next one to the one after that. The big thing, of course, ag and climate change. If you're a farmer, you're hearing about this a lot. But I just want to reiterate, because there's a lot of talk about carbon neutral with solar, and that is true. Carbon neutral aspects of solar power and that sort of electrical generation is great. But there's actually an aspect of modern farming that is carbon capture now that actually farmers are starting to be paid for. Now, I don't know if they're going to be paid enough to make up the difference and compete with the solar rates of lease. I doubt that, but there are guys that are being paid to sequester carbon. The way that that happens is when, say you plant a corn plant, it grows, and as it's growing, it's locking carbon up into the lignified carbon inside the plant. When you harvest with a combine, you only take the grain, you leave the rest of the plant there, and that carbon stays there. A lot of the carbon of the corn plant is actually down in the ground, 5 times the root mass of soybeans. So what scientists have found is actually by doing this process, no-till, you can actually begin to sequester more carbon than a lot of the surrounding industrial pollution puts out. The other slide that I had Don skip over was actually a little trailer for a film. You don't have to go back, Don. Okay. But I'm going to give you a little thing that shows you on your own time, watch it. It's on YouTube. It's a great movie. Woody Harrelson narrates it. It's called Kiss the Ground. It really fleshes that out for you. And some of the scientists who are from France and stuff make some crazy claims. I'm not sure I believe that farming livestock and crops this new way can actually, without switching to electric cars, without switching to anything else, can actually start to undo climate change and not require cutbacks in any other industrial use. That's extreme, but nonetheless it is. Mob grazing is a big thing, not a big thing in the U.S. It's labor intensive, but basically what they're finding is that mob grazing encourages methantropic bacteria in the soil. Methanotrops are bacteria that actually eat methane. And if you're grazing and the grass is really tall and the cows are moved every day, or sheep or whatever it is, you're not using feedlots, you're not feeding grain. That methantropic bacteria actually eats all the methane that the cows emit in a year, plus it can eat up all the methane in the atmosphere in that whole area. So it's a pretty incredible thing that's just been discovered. That produces red meat with less carbon footprint than even most plant sources. So maybe eating red meat will be popular again. Next slide. This is what those uses look like on the land. I just throw all this out there because a lot of folks think that ag is kind of like an old-fashioned thing, and it's not. It's very important. It's very important in this county, and I think it's something we should not forget about, because we need clean water and we need good food to eat. We can do without a lot of other things, but we need these things. So that's mob grazing on the right. Those cows in a mob grazing system get moved every 24 hours, sometimes twice a day. So that grass that they're on right there, they trample it, and then tomorrow they're back there, and it may be a year before they come back to that site. So, okay, next slide is pretty incredible as well, and this is just the science behind that thought that maybe cropping a better way is actually able to sequester a ton of carbon. These are NASA images using fluorescence. That fluorescence is actually oxygen being emitted by, the corn crop in the corn belt. Now, if you look at the slide on the right, that red is oxygen being emitted. And if you look at the Amazon rainforest, what do you see? The corn belt in July in the United States emits more oxygen than all of the Amazon rainforest. That's just corn breathing. It's breathing in carbon dioxide, sequestering carbon, and breathing out oxygen. So that's why there are a lot of global managers of climate change who think it's time to start paying farmers to keep that residue on the land and paying grazers to move their animals around every day and get rid of the feedlots. So anyway, that's kind of cool, but next slide. I'm going to skip through these next two pretty quick, Don. All right. Yeah, you've got some big problems out west, droughts, fires. The image on the right, I've actually been to this farm that's in the Imperial Valley of California. That water comes from 500-600 miles away to get to this field. But 90% of the broccoli in the United States this week is being grown in that one little valley. Next slide. And that's what Imperial County looks like when you don't irrigate it. On the right is an image of just Bureau of Land Management. As y'all know, most of the land west of the Rockies was never granted to private people. So when we moved into Virginia, people were handing out land grants. That didn't happen out west, and it has yet to happen. So a lot of the land is public. If you graze or farm a lot of land, you're actually renting land from the federal government. That's becoming a problem because people want to mountain bike, they want to camp, there's lots of wildfire, and there's no water. So what I'm telling you is that a lot of people are now talking that the future of growing food in the United States needs to come back east. It needs to come back east to the Rockies, and it definitely needs to come back east to the Mississippi River. So think about that as being land managers in this room. And you can go ahead to the next slide, Don. We need to think long and hard. Every acre of farmland in this county that's lost, think about the food impact. It's not the end of the world, but it's certainly, it's something to think about. Timber, 45,000 acres of timber in Lancaster County. I was surprised when the Department of Forestry told me that recently. And they gave me these numbers. That's their latest number from 2019, 1.3 cubic feet of, 1.3 million cubic feet of timber harvested. I don't know what that equates to in board feet. Direct impact of $3 million, but the thing that's kind of sad is that bottom number. Our annual harvest that they have records for is only about $307,000. As many logs as I see go by me, if you sit there at Rocket Billy's or something, it's amazing that it's that low. Part of the problem is on the right. All those local mills, none of them are located in the county, and many of them are actually foreign-owned. Next slide. The value of timber in the county retail is probably exponentially higher than that, probably 20, 30, maybe even $100 million of street value, but it's just not processed into boards here. As I mentioned, residential land needs. We do have residential land needs here, but you don't have a big population here, and you are very, very far, as you can see from this map on the left, from all of the residential needs in the state. You don't need to provide residences for those people. They live in the major cities unless somebody brings them here. However, that is still a concern. You still have a major problem with affordable housing here that needs to be addressed, but your residential land needs, thankfully, are pretty low. This slide on the right comes from your comp plan. This is your latest version of the future land use map. And that's kind of small, but a lot of y'all are familiar with this anyway. Your reservoir sites are identified, your waterfront overlay is identified, your primary growth area there in the middle between the three towns, and your town areas are identified. So when you look at that map, you've got to figure all that kind of teal bluish area. Of course, I'm a man, I'm half colorblind. They're kind of teal blue to me. Not the reservoir sites, but the real lighter blue. That's where you have to figure, squeeze in all of your food and ag production, your timber production, and possible future solar development. You start with 133 square mile county, but you end up with actually some small slivers here and there, and it's tough to make a decision like that. Yes, sir, next slide. Mr. Lee's gonna get mad at this slide, but I'm sorry. Hunting is a need, small need. Hiking, biking, and walking. The slide on the left is your Triway Trail. You guys have heard me talking about the Triway Trail. I'm your representative to the Triway Trail Committee, and that is the approximate route of the Triway Trail that would connect the three towns. And that's a pretty neat thing, and it's a use of rural lands, a narrow linear use of rural lands, but still something that's recreational, that adds to quality of life. Maybe not money per se, but quality of life. The hunting, you guys, I think, wasn't that shot on your farm, Don? You know that guy, don't you?
I do know that guy.
That's Russell Haney. Okay, next picture.
I don't
He'd
recall.
probably be mad if I showed that.
I don't recall him getting that one there. Though.
Yeah. That was in 2015. That was, I think, the #1 bow kill in Virginia that year. So Lancaster County can have some nice bucks. In terms of art, just in case anybody forgot or doesn't know, when we talk about solar projects, megawatt is just 1,000,000 watts. And watt is amperage times voltage. I remember Mr. Smart telling me that the first time we started messing with this. He was an electrical guy in the Navy, so he was really into that. The acres required to produce 1 megawatt, 2.5 acres to 5 acres average. That is dropping because panels are getting more efficient. You need 877 kilowatt hours per month to power your home. That depends. I got that from the National Home Builders Association, so that's nationwide. Yours might be a lot less, I don't know. most of our local lines, and we're going to talk about that in a quick second, are rated in kilovolt. So it's confusing, been confusing to me because I'm not an electrical guy. I don't like messing with electricity for obvious reasons. The lines on the sides of the roads and all the rural lines are rated in kilovolt, and even our main transmission line, it'll say KV, but then we started talking about solar farms and megawatts, and it's been hard to square the two in my mind. So that's why I threw that up there, to just give you an idea of what you're dealing with. All right, next one, Don. Distribution lines versus transmission lines is very basic, but I'll throw it out there just so we're all on the same page. The transmission lines, we have one big, I call them high flyers, running right through the middle of the county, going right on over to Middlesex. And then we have tons of distribution lines. These run through farm fields, run down the roads, run through your subdivision, whatever. And most of them I found in the county range from 4 kilovolts to 15 kilovolts. I think there's a few that are higher, but that's the average. Next. So, like I've already said, the distribution projects were not really previously considered when we were developing the ordinance. Waller Solar is the only project I'm going to name by name tonight, just because the others that haven't been heard yet, it's not fair. This is not a hearing of them. Waller's over and done with, so I just mention it because they were the main thrust behind developing the ordinance. However, the ability, and I'm just speaking for myself here, you know, maybe somebody else knew something otherwise, but for myself, the ability for a utility level project to be located on some of these distribution lines was not well understood at the time of the development of the ordinance. You feel free to agree with me or disagree with me on that, that's fine. But I think that the purpose of this meeting now is for us to get an understanding of the bigger picture. We were thinking major transmission project, and we were told in this body, you guys were told and the board was told, this will be the main project you have. After us, there's no room left on the line. Well, the problem is there is room left on the line because there's room left on the distribution line. So I think it's natural for someone to understand that the county wants to get an understanding of that before we go forward. So that's the Dumb and Dumber. That's why we're here. All right, next slide. Yeah, so questions. I'm better at asking questions than I am answering them, and maybe most of y'all are like that too. So these are the questions that board members have asked me, planning commission members have asked me, the public has asked me. Even solar developers sometimes have asked me these questions. And these are the questions I ask. How many substations do we have? We have 3, if you don't include Garner, which is technically in Richmond County.
2 on River Road.
Okay, yeah, well,
That's
yeah.
Northern Neck Electric.
Yeah, Northern Neck Electric, yeah. For the purposes of this discussion, they're not out, but they are not required yet to provide a renewable energy slice yet. And they indicated at least a few months ago that they are not interested in this time in developing that capacity. But you're right, that could be very wise to say that could change next week. How many projects would fit on each substation? What's the capacity on each? What if the transmission lines double in capacity? What would that require? New lines, new switching? Certainly they've got a big enough right-of-way, you just add some more lines. One of the meetings we had, somebody said, well, I'll bet you lunch that would never happen, and I think I read a press release that Dominion's looking into it, so I was like, I don't know, it might be lunchtime.
All they have to do is turn the power up.
Yeah. So what if the transmission line, what if the transmission lines double in capacity? What happens to your transmission? Your transmission lines may be full now, that's what we seem to understand. What if they double in capacity? Now you're open to another 1,500 acres or so of utility scale solar on with the bigger players. What if more substations are added? What is involved in that? And when have we provided all the power we need domestically? There again, I'll just speak for myself, not to implicate any of you all. It would be great if the utility would come to us, or had already come to us 2 years ago with answers to all those questions and said, hey, here's our cards, here's what we need, this is what the governor's forcing us to do, can you help us? I think they'd be farther along than they are now and be running into less resistance, but that's just me. All right, go ahead. So this is something, sadly, I only found this week, and I found it on my own just in desperate searching on Dominion Power's website. This is what they have it's called the hosting capacity tool, and I'm going to get y'all, I've got some copies of this for y'all. You guys can spread those out. And then I've got extras for the public. So this, I put 2022 on there because that's the day I stole it and stuck it on a slide. This data is about a year old from what I have been able to understand, thankfully from some people who set me straight on it. This is a statewide map that you can actually look at on your own desktop, and then you can zoom in on different areas. It looks like it's kind of Google Earth enabled. I drag and dropped the scale on the right. What's interesting is I would use red for like a lot of power, but they kind of, just Dominion, they did it opposite. So red might generally be construed to mean that those lines do not need, they can't host much more capacity. They may already be at capacity or quote unquote closed off. Also, being that it's a year old, this does not reflect Rappahannock Solar or the second phase of Rappahannock Solar that you heard last month. And so that's your two main. That may change the situation. You can see Akron Road right there. Looks like it has 8 megawatts of capacity. That may be closed out now. I don't know. This is not updated. So I talked to a solar developer today who said that this is a bit out of date. So if you look around, you see there are spaces available on the line. Now you have several distribution projects that are queuing up to fit on those places. I think what you're going to want to do as you go forward with these projects is get a good idea of, okay, applicant, you're going to fit here, and then maybe this map or hopefully something better, you can kind of get an idea for your land use planning where it's fitting. I spent a lot of time reading the minutes of planning commissions and boards from all over the state just to get an idea of what they're doing. And I don't really hear, and the first thing I have on there is a thing where there's a bunch of projects that have been denied statewide. So I generally look at their minutes and try to see what happened and why. I don't see a lot of county land planners asking these developers about the nitty-gritty of their business, saying, tell me why you want to fit on this line. Scientifically why, not just land use. We're concerned with buffers, rightly so, impacts on neighbors, entrances, view sheds, all those things that we should be concerned about, water runoff, other things. But I think we're at a point, just like I'm talking about with agriculture, there's obviously a failure going on because the shelves are empty. You need to step in as leaders where leadership is failing and say, maybe locally we can do a better job. The same thing with energy generation. Something is not right. It's not being managed the way it should be. My words, not yours. Maybe it's time for county leaders to say, okay, I see Dominion says they need hosting capacity. They've got hosting capacity there where this much solar capacity could fit on that line. Why? And is that a good thing? And maybe it's an area in the county where it would fit, where it's maybe a place where it's a dilapidated old farm that needs to be fixed up, and maybe it's out of the way, and maybe it's not good farmland, and maybe that works. So I think it's time to start thinking that. I didn't realize that this was out here, but it is. And I think we need to start making use of those tools better, and maybe calling Dominion out a little bit more and saying, okay, you don't have to show us your cards. It's business, it's capitalism. You don't need to show us all of your cards, but we do need to be your partner. You're asking us to be your partner in energy generation. You're asking the citizens of our county to give up maybe what they think is a pretty view or an easy way to get around. So don't just compensate us financially, but also give us some help. All right, next slide. Yeah, so I've talked about this with several of you, and I've also been hearing this from citizens. Possibility of acreage cap, distance restrictions, where's the limit, is it appropriate? I think that's a natural arc of things that can happen with any use that's that lucrative. You need to be able to have a feel for what you're in for, what's the final tally on that. So Lancaster County is 133 square miles. There's 640 acres in a mile. All those fields in the Imperial Valley are exactly 640 acres square. They're square mile fields. That's pretty cool. But 85,000 acres is in the county total. That does include some water area too, though, so that's a little misleading. The acres you currently have approved, 1,495 under fence or what I call array field. So that's about 1.7% of your total county area. County area should be a better word than land area. Your acres of arable land currently quote-unquote farmed, and I'll say air quotes, 16,238, because your annual reported cropping acreage is, help me Don, I think it's about 14,000 a year. So the other 2,000 is probably pastures, maybe CRP land, wetland reserve program land, or other lands that are otherwise quote-unquote farmland, but maybe not actively farmed right now. That's why I call them arable, because arable land is something you could bring into production within that suite of agricultural options.
Does that include timberland?
No, that does not include timberland, no. So your 45,000 acres of timberland is separate from that number. So if you add those two together, a huge swath, the majority of the county is really either timberland or farmland. So that's a good.
So why wouldn't you add that there? I mean, why wouldn't you add timber?
Well, I'm being blunt, so I'll go ahead and be blunt. A long time ago, a mistake was made where forestry and farming were divided. They should have been kept together. In the UK and all over the world, there's no difference between farming and forestry. It's all considered lumped together. We're all on the same side of campus. For some reason in the United States, the departments of forestry are very separate from ag. They don't really speak to each other at all. Now, a lot of farmers are heavily involved in forestry, obviously, because you own a 100-acre farm, usually 50 of it's cleared and 50 of it's timbered, and the two work together. But sadly, they're not counted together. This number came from USDA, and sadly, Tom, USDA keeps a little bit of track of timber acreage, but most of it's Department of Forestry that does that. The acres of arable land currently permitted to solar, I should have put an asterisk by this. I'm giving you an asterisk right now because I'm just adding that up based on maps, and some of the applications we have approved did not really break out adequately. Okay, this was 40 acres of lease, and this was 20 acres of farm field and 20 acres of woods that we're going to clear. But you're right at about 2.7% of your arable that's currently permitted to be solar or already is developed in solar. Did you? Okay. I thought I saw your hand up again. Maybe that was, okay, that was Charlie. All right, next slide.
No, that's it.
Oh, that's it. Okay, yeah. If you look in the little thing I gave you for extra materials, you have a thing in here from the Mecklenburg Comprehensive Plan. Mecklenburg did not originally have some of that language in their comprehensive plan. It's been added. They have recommendations in here. Number one, should be located on brownfields or near existing industrial sites, but not within growth boundaries. Number two, should be located adjacent to or in close proximity to existing electric transmission lines. Three, avoid or minimize prime farmland or farmlands of statewide importance. The number four was interesting to me, should be located outside of any identified growth boundary and not within 1 mile of any town boundary. I don't know why Mecklenburg did that. unless they were getting pressure from some of their towns. They are not capping the total acreage in the county, but if you look down there, they are capping the average size or the total size of any facility should not exceed 500 acres. You guys can have your own opinion on that. I'm not sure of the wisdom of that because some projects might be quote-unquote 2,000 acres, but there are some areas of each facility that are only going to be 40 acres here, 100 acres there. Some aspects of Waller, for instance, look exactly like the average small distribution facility because they're in smaller areas, and some of them are 300 acres in one area. It's hard to cap it at a size, although they're not the only ones doing that. I think up near Winchester, they're doing that as well. But I don't have proof of that in front of you, so we won't talk about that. Brunswick County, if you flip over, the Brunswick County Solar Ordinance, page 6 through 11, it's a pretty big ordinance, but they have limited their total acreage to 8,600 acres for the whole county, which sounds like a lot until you realize that Brunswick County is 564 square miles, which is almost 5 times the size of Lancaster County. So that's about, and I've got a decimal in the wrong place, sorry. It's actually, that 8,600 acres for them equates to 2.3% of the county area. Those are just 2 examples of acreage limits, acreage caps I found. You are at 1.7% of the county now. If you adopted something like a Brunswick County kind of restriction in your ordinance, you have room for a couple hundred more acres of solar, but then that would be it. That's something to think about. I think that was all. That was pretty much what I wanted to throw at you guys. I think at this time you would probably be wise to either ask me questions or kick it about. I know several of you have your own ideas. I just tried to give you some basic ideas or framework of if you did a cap, what it might look like, what it might not look like. Mr. Cornwell and I have been talking about the legalities of some of that. You have, in your packet last week, for that reason, I gave you kind of a report of where your projects that you have good faith permitted, where they are right now. You've got 3 that are still in the hopper. So I don't know how any of your changes would affect those projects. You may not be able to regulate those. You may have to hear those under your old rules, and then anything that was applied for after a certain date would be subject to your cap. But that's something that you can talk about with Mr. Cornwell. Any questions for me?
That was the question,
Okay.
that was the question I had.
Yeah, I would, just as your staff person, I would have your other projects, two of those 3 have already gone to the Planning Commission. The other project, though it's right at 5 megawatts, is talking about a siting agreement, so you would have the option to possibly have it directly come to you, to the board. They are smaller projects. You may not want to subject them to the cap, but your cap or your limits, whether it's in the ordinance or whether you decide to put it into the comprehensive plan in Chapter 6 or Chapter 7. You've got Chapter 6 that's tabled. You could send that back to the Planning Commission and put cap-like language like Mecklenburg did into that chapter. Now, that's not as binding as an ordinance, but still it's a guiding document that you use in your decision-making process. You may want to do it that way. You may want to just hear these others and go forward and just protect yourself from further distribution projects. Looking at that map, that capacity map, if you really look at it closer and spend some more time on it, not tonight, but later, we may find that those 3 projects that are in our queue right now may change that map immensely and take away a lot of that, although you'll still have 2 green lines, up 200 and up 3 in the middle there. That's up to you.
Well, as always, too, the option is, as the board has already done, in looking at those areas that you want to protect by creating larger setbacks. from those areas, particularly wetlands, residential areas, and so forth, which, given the amount of wetlands in Lancaster County, could be a rather substantial tool in limiting these kind of projects. I think, what's our current setback for wetlands, 150?
Yeah.
So this what I had wrote out a month ago is what you talking about. Projects shall not come within 800 feet of designated wetlands, something in that order.
Something in that
And I
order.
had, I had said 800 feet, but.
And that's a tool that you can legally justify because of the possibility of water pollution. Some of these, and I don't know, I know that there was a project just voted down in Brunswick, I believe. No, Mecklenburg, because it was more than 500 acres. Mecklenburg has a 500-acre limitation on the size of the projects. I understand that there was also a project that may have been squelched in Brunswick because it was too big. So there are tools out there that you need to use, but you've got to be careful that they are defensible.
That's the key thing, I think, too, is that the comprehensive plan or whatever we put in it has got to be defensible. That's what was critical in the Dominion case. The comp language is what helped win that case, clearly, because we could point to specific things that we could then take out and defend. So that's why I was important that the language we put in here has got to be something that's defendable. It just can't be something willy-nilly or something vague. It's got to be concrete, so things like what you proposed there are concrete things that we can say, oh, well, this doesn't meet that requirement, denied.
One of my concerns is on Route 3. We got some, or at least one project is proposed to come on Route 3, and then I'm thinking about there's probably gonna be some others. What protection do we provide for Route 3?
Well, you could do increased setbacks.
What was the setback we set for the highway overlay, which would include Route 3, so
It's a 200.
200 feet setback.
from.
I believe it's 1,000 feet on Route 3. Are you hearing me? This is Dave Chupp,
Yes. It was 200.
Planning Commission member.
What is the, is it 2 or 250? 250. Yeah, it's 250 on the highway corridor overlay district.
And because we talked about that a bunch in the planning commission, and we thought 250 was,
Good enough.
good enough. At that time.
1,000 feet. It's 1,000 feet for Route 3, 354 and 200.
You said
Are
1,000.
you hearing me?
Yeah, but when it got to the board changed it to 250, I believe, is the way it happened,
I
Dave.
don't think it came to.
I don't think, we talked about 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
We never, the ordinance was 250, that was. what
Yeah,
was
they followed
recommended
us 250.
On those roads, a 250-foot setback.
And you can also, as part of your comprehensive plan, adopt growth areas and no-growth areas, agriculturally protected areas, in which, although solar farms may be permitted, it would be a question of whether it complied with the comp plan, because that's an agriculturally permitted or protected area. So there are lots of tools out there that can be used to not necessarily to designate solar farms to areas that you want them to go, or keep them out of areas that you don't want them to go.
What about like setting sort of a percentage or a cap on the amount of land that could be cleared to build a solar farm? Say if you were building a 1,000-acre project, could we say only, you couldn't clear more than 25% of that land?
Well, probably the safest way to do that probably is in the special use permit on that project, rather than a blanket. Because you remember, you can set, when a project comes to you for a special use permit, you can set standards for that project. I have some squeamishness about saying you can't use more than 10% of the county for solar farms. Why 10%? Why not 8%? Why not 4%? Why not,
Seems arbitrary.
yeah, exactly.
Jason, when you say cleared, what do you mean, like timber cleared?
Like if it's a forested plot of land, like how much of it we would allow to be clear cut to basically put solar down, which to me is sort of counterproductive to solar, I mean.
You go timber the property anytime to sell the wood.
Yeah, but that's like when you timber a land, you clear cut it and you allow trees to grow back, that's a very different environmental invasion than versus like clear cutting the land, tearing up the stumps, and then allowing it to be turned into basically cropland at that point. That's much more environmentally invasive to me than just clear cutting land, allowing it to grow back and using it as like a typical farm would be.
So.
You get into whole other issues like we've seen in other places with land erosion and things like that. It can create other problems when you clear cut land that you rip up the stumps and all that, because the solar panels themselves create more drainage on that land, and so you have more capability of destabilizing that land. So I think that also when you think about, does it make a whole lot of sense to cut down trees to put up solar panels when you're trying to reduce carbon? I'm not so sure that what the benefit there is.
If, what I'm thinking now, Ms. Cornwell can chime in on this. If a farmer decides to expand his field, and they do the same thing you talking about, so you're gonna allow him to do that, but you're not gonna allow him to put up solar panels on it, because we got farmers around here that's clearing, timber and digging up the stumps and expanding the field, so you get into that part of it, if you start restricting them, saying, hey, you can't cut with 25% because you're putting in a solar farm, but if you're gonna farm it, then it's different.
What'll happen is the farmer will sign an intent to lease, and then he'll clear cut it, and then he'll sign the lease.
That's done.
Yeah, I just don't see how you can justify letting the farmer do it for farming, but not for solar.
Okay, I'm gonna plead ignorance here because I have a lot to learn. But why are we hearing cases when we have so much work to be done with our comprehensive plan?
Well, we already have an ordinance on the books. It was passed in February of 2021. It took effect July 1 of 2021. But that ordinance was passed basically with the knowledge of solar projects tying into the transmission line. I don't think people really realized that these smaller projects could tie into the distribution lines. And when the applications started coming in after July 1, when the ordinance took effect, we had the one utility scale solar project which applied, but we've had 4 or 5 or more of these smaller projects apply, the 20 to 50 acre projects that tie directly into the distribution line. And our ordinance was not created with that knowledge. And so that's the purpose of bringing these two bodies back together to see if there's anything in the ordinance which you all want to change, and in the comprehensive plan as well.
You can see from the hosting capacity of the map, and
These are distribution lines.
distribution lines. So in other words, if a system, a solar project would come online that would produce 5 megawatts, then literally you could get 2 of them on the distribution line that is 12 megawatts. And you could get 4 of them on the 20 megawatt. So all of a sudden, you're increasing the number of solar farms, even though they're smaller. You're increasing the number of them in the county and the number of acreage that is put under panel.
Yeah, Brian, I really appreciate your slideshow. I think you did a great job to summarize this. I'm a little confused about that hosting capacity and the number of, how that fits in with the 6 or 4, I'm missing not the distribution line.
Don't feel bad before you say the rest. I am too. I've spent hours looking at this because it's not layman friendly, to be quite honest. I may make some homework for myself that I bet y'all would appreciate, and that is to get into it and maybe work with Glenn and come up with a map on using our data that uses this somehow. And I'm reaching out to Dominion to try to get some of their experts to help me flesh it out, but give you guys a more of a layman's picture, a map of the county, where these lines are and where your potential capacity is in megawattage and in acreage, using 2.5 acres per megawatt as a guide.
Well, I do like, and we go back to looking at Mecklenburg's when they said it should be located outside the viewshed of scenic, cultural, and recreational resources. I would add historic resources to that. That's a pretty good line and statement. It's somewhat broad, but also could be narrowed down, and you could make a decision around that pretty easily that would fit that and then be defensible.
Yeah, yeah. And that's in Mecklenburg's comprehensive plan, yeah.
Yeah, I think that could be easily added.
One of the things I want to throw out here, and Brian has already mentioned to it, the solar companies themselves, the projects that we already have, and we got a list of them here. There's been a lot of pressure put on the staff to do something, and I know that because I've been getting calls myself. Okay, we spending money out here. This is the project. We spending money. We gonna lose millions of dollars if y'all don't hear these things. And we can tell them all we want that, hey, we got till June or July or whatever, but it's their money that's sitting out there. So I'm wondering, legally, Mr. Cornwell, this, we got 5. We got about 5 sites. If we deal with these 5, we deal with these 5 sites coming up and use what the tools we got now to govern, our decision on those. Anything after that, whatever we do, because what we talking about right now is gonna take a while for us to flush out, it seems to me.
Well, the problem we've got is we can't put a moratorium on applications. The Supreme Court said we can't do that.
So we got that's why I'm saying, if we deal with the applications that we got now, but anything coming in after tonight, or after whatever deadline, we don't even have to ticket it, right?
No, we do.
We do?
You can't put a moratorium on the zoning application.
But they can go through the length of the process. They can't rush us.
Exactly.
We can make it, we
You
could draw
have-
the
you
process
have
out to
you
the
have
full
the
length the
period of
law
time that-
allows us.
You have the period of time the code gives you. And also, I think that I think you can change the regulations during the process. My thought is if, and I know this puts pressure on everybody, but if we can come up with some suggested changes to the ordinance, we cannot adopt an emergency ordinance, but we can push those changes through and make it govern maybe even these ones that are applying, but it's certainly on the new ones.
But my thinking is what Mr. Lee had about the 800 setback. And also I'm thinking about on the Route 3 corridor, we got the 200 setback, but I'd like to add something else to it. I'd like to add that they'd have to put plantings in there, and I forgot the name of the trees. But it's a buffer, but what's the name of those trees, like this bread and breakfast down here on 3?
You talking Leland Cypress?
Something like that, yeah, and plant them so many feet apart. I'd like to have that in there. If they're gonna do that on Route 3, these are the things they're gonna have to do to where, I would say from the year 1, it's basically gonna be hid from view from Route 3. That's the thing I'm thinking about here, that we can say certain number, certain sizes, and so many feet apart.
Yeah, you're referring to planning the buffer pre-construction.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, so by the time construction get done and completed, they're growing, and they're at least 8-10 feet tall.
Mr. Cornwell, what have you seen? You experience a lot more counties than we do. Obviously, the goal here is to try to put our arms around what's going on. We thought maybe the special exception would do that as we were moving forward, but it seems like we need to be a little bit more specific, if I'm hearing you correctly. So you said you didn't like the cap percentage of the land total per se. What other means do we have
Well, I think
that you've seen that have been successful?
what we've talked about, obviously, a special use permit, you can make whatever conditions you want to make for that project that are project specific. Okay, so,
We put that in there, sort of our insurance policy.
that's it. And if they want to put a project in this place, you can say in this place, you got to do X, Y, and Z in addition to rest of it,
So we have that ability with the projects that are in queue
for the special use permit,
currently.
for the special use permit applications. But I'm much more comfortable with setbacks from,
Wetlands.
wetlands, setbacks from major highways, setbacks from towns and population growth areas, setbacks from residential zones. I'm much more comfortable with those kind of things because they are specific, and the reason for them is specific, that is to protect whatever you're wanting to setback from. I just am not as comfortable with saying, we got 8,000 acres is the most anybody can put, total of solar farms, because you gotta defend that 8,000 acres.
Yeah, why was it 9, why was it 10?
Why wasn't it 7? Why wasn't it 10? That gets,
And that's the same with acreage requirements as
yeah,
well, in your
yeah.
opinion?
Well, total acreage in the county.
No,
You can do acreage requirements on projects.
so that could be another.
Yes.
I think you could probably accomplish the acreage cap in Lancaster County by setting a pretty heavy setback from wetlands.
Based
That
on that
would-
map that you showed, Brian, I think that's the true statement.
In some ways, if you set that to a certain point, it would almost eliminate every project.
Do you want to mention?
Maybe that's the best way to go about it.
And I can't, the 800 feet is something, I just came up with. Maybe that's not enough, I don't know, but I think I was looking at the Hubbard crop deal when I came up with that 800 feet.
Let's make
In
sure.
that case, I think that would kick that project out of being.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Let's make sure that the reason we're adopting setbacks from wetlands is to protect the wetlands.
That's
not-
right.
Not to kill solar projects.
Yeah, definitely, but I'm just saying, if you do that, it would, could essentially.
What is the plan of the board? I mean, what do we want to do here? What does the county want to do?
That's what we're
Whenever
trying.
someone starts twisting my arm, I'm going to fight back, and that's kind of like what I feel right now, that my arm's being twisted. Who are we getting pressure from? The federal government, from Dominion Power, or from the developers
We're
who
getting
have
pressure
already
from-
invested their money?
Yeah, we're getting
Or all
pressure
three?
from the solar projects that want to do their solar projects and use up agriculture and forestry land. That's who we're getting pressure from.
And they've invested money, and now they want us to make a decision.
Yeah,
But they're
Also the
also
land-
following a mandate.
Also the landowners, the county landowners
right,
that have signed.
because they've leased property.
Because they're leasing their property, they want it to go ahead.
And what did you just say,
So
Jason?
the constituent is the owner of the land, our county resident.
And we've had a long tradition here in Lancaster County of supporting agriculture, supporting farmers, and and I think that came up in the Waller hearing about, well, if a farmer wants to lease his property to a solar farm, instead of farming it, who are we to stand in the way?
Right.
And that's true, but then again, when you keep multiplying these projects, then you come to a point where maybe there's too many acres under panel, so to speak, and the visual impacts and things like that. So you've got to weigh the.
And there's a balance to keeping warm versus starving to death, based on one of your slides.
Yeah, and I think, from my standpoint, where I'm sitting, my goal is to make sure we have good plans, the board and the commission. And it's hard to plan when you don't know what you're in for, and like Tom said, when you look, the layman looks at that map, it's very confusing. It'd be great to have something that simply says, down this road, we need this much. I think it's, part of it's fear of the unknown, but also part of it, you guys are charged with, and the code requires you to plan, but it's hard to plan when you're just the recipient of applications monthly or yearly that you have to decide on. There's no way to kind of have an aim point, like, okay. And I think that's probably why Brunswick went with an acreage, because that just gave them a target and a backstop. But you're right, that can be unfair to people who, and some of these smaller projects are not the whole farmer's acreage. He might farm 1,000 acres and 20 acres over here that gives them an income every year. That does help local agriculture. So it's a tough decision. It's tough. It's a tough issue. It's tough.
I think hopefully all we're talking about is tweaking the current ordinance. I think it's a good ordinance.
Okay.
I think we work,
worked really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, we put a lot of effort into it. Things have changed and we've become more educated. But some of what I'm hearing is like, you know, almost you want to shut it down. And, I mean, that's a decision, but obviously I think that's not defensible.
Yeah, I think,
And we do have a waterfront overlay, you know, that they're not allowed to be in. So there is a waterfront overlay setback already in the ordinance.
didn't that get removed?
No, that waterfront overlay setback only applies to, it's a solid blue line on the US topographical map. It's not all wetlands. It's basically perennial streams and navigable water.
And a lot of that's residential even too, so
A lot
it's-
of it is residential,
it would
yes.
only really apply to the agricultural land that falls within the waterfront overlay.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be correct, yes. And the timber inside the waterfront residential overlay.
So there are competing interests between the developers who want to develop a solar project and lease it or sell it to Dominion or some other company, and farmers who may want to use part of their farms to produce an income from a solar project, and residents of the county who don't want basically to see lots of panels around to, you know, from the, for these projects, and it's just, it's a weighing of compelling interest, and then you throw onto that the issues related to appropriate land use and protection of the environment, such as the wetlands issues, such as the, you know, timber issues and so forth and that, and you throw those issues in there, and it gets complicated. I mean, it is.
It's a matter of finding what the balance is, and that's what we're here to do, and that's the hard part, I think.
So can we say that we got two things we can hang our hats on tonight? And that one is that line 5 that we read. And we do need to add historical sites in there.
Yep.
And I think the other is a setback from wetlands. Wetlands, you know, that I brought up a month ago. I think we need to define that, you know, and I'm not hung up on 800 feet. I'm just, you know, I was kind of looking at a project that we already did. And Jason's absolutely right. If that was in there, that project wouldn't fit now.
And I believe that would have probably taken out the Waller project, but I don't know for sure.
So, I mean, I'm saying 800 feet, you know, but.
And there is support for that from the project, where was it that, what was the project that had all the pollution, in another county?
Oh, yeah, the Louisa County.
Louisa County, so there is support for that. I can walk in and say, look what happened in Louisa, and we didn't want that to happen in Lancaster, so.
So,
What is it, is it normally, is a 100-foot setback from wetlands to build in, or to,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and that's if you're building a house
correct,
or
yeah.
a structure of some kind?
Yeah, and actually, ag has to abide by that as well.
Yeah, of course, they can encroach if they have best management practices in place.
is it, I guess, between Brian and staff, is it a way to come up with a distance? You know, you know, like I said, I just went with 800 because I rode by that project and I said, man, 800 feet would put them, you know, out of the project, but.
But that's not.
That's not really the point.
Yeah, that's right. That's not, you know, that's not.
Keep saying that.
And I'm just wondering, what would be,
Well, Brian
Would
can come up,
250 be a better
Brian
number?
can produce a wetlands map for the planning commission to look at.
I think, yeah, I don't want to overcommit Glenn, but I think that's something that we could
And that might see.
work on, yeah.
That, and in relationship to a larger setback on Route 3, and different buffering standards. And then you can also, distance from, incorporated towns. You know, between those 3 or 4 things, it's going to naturally reduce the amount of acreage that's available, that needs to be protected,
Right.
in case of pollution and site distances.
Don't we already have a primary growth area in the county?
Yes.
that's
We do,
located
we do.
between-
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Kilmarnock, Whitestone, everything.
Yeah, and that is mapped in your comp plan now, and that's,
And we could,
you know, that's pretty good.
And we
We
have
can limit
two
them.
projects now that's up for, I don't know whether they applied yet, but they are in that primary growth area.
And that would
The
be a
Salem
reason for
Road and
denying
Harris
it.
Road, they're
Yeah.
within
Yeah.
that growth area.
And Hubbard. And Hubbard.
Yeah, and Hubbard, yeah.
Oh, it was
But Hubbard's been approved, but we
Yeah.
got two that's, in the
Hubbard's a
queue.
kind of a unique
Yeah, that's on the
situation too, because that's on an M1 parcel, which in my
Yeah.
opinion, they could have almost done
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
That's
that's
They put
right.
a junkyard there.
They
Yeah,
just chose
exactly. It
to
was
do
a-
it
Right.
a better way and went through the process more so than I think they absolutely had to because of the difference in zoning there, but,
It didn't look good.
I mean, I get it, we don't wanna have 100 different facilities in the county, but the two that the planning commission has seen on the Harris Road and Old Salem, I mean, those are kind of,
And Route 3.
and Route 3 also. I mean, they complied, with the ordinance, and you're not gonna be able to see them.
They were textbook,
I mean, they,
great project.
I think they conformed very well to,
According to the ordinance.
and
yeah, and you're not gonna see them from Route 3 and 2, I mean, they're off, they're just well situated.
And
And I'm
I
not
think-
saying that each one in the future is gonna be as well situated, but, I'm not sure if you're trying to tweak those, or, I mean, I'm not sure what the objective here really is, except to limit the number of,
I think, Tom, that's the thing, is the number of projects that the county, is willing to support or have. It's the overall number. I think, do we want one every 3 miles, one every 5 miles, one every 10 miles? Do we want 100 of these things scattered over the county? I think that would be the objective, because we can deal with, just like those two come in. If they don't meet, the ordinance, and we don't think they're in a good spot, they can be denied.
I think with the language in number 5 and additional, like tweaking of the setback, we will accomplish pretty much what we want to do: protect land, protect water, protect agricultural land from, and historical resources, recreational resources. We'll be able to do that with language like that.
How about
'Cause then
Mr.
we-
Can I break in here for a minute? This is Dave Chupp again. I'd like to speak up for one of the interests that I don't think has really been represented here tonight. And it's probably the most important interest involved. That's the farmers. The Planning Commission sat through many, many hours of testimony from farmers. And all but one of the farmers from our county who testified were strongly in favor of this. They talked about how farming has progressed in the county, the increasing costs of machinery, chemicals, fertilizer. It's very tough to make a living in farming on the scale it has to be done in this country. Utility scale solar offered them a very solid financial future over a period of a lot of years, typically 30 years. A solid financial income with no droughts, freezes, crop failures, that sort of thing. Climate change. Some of them talked about actually being able to retire. So this is a very big thing for an important segment of our county. And it seems to me that going back to what our attorney said, it's really their land, and they should be able to decide what to do with it. We've passed an ordinance which has all kinds of protections in it for stormwater, drainage, anything you can think of. And underlying all that, the Board of Supervisors has an absolute right to turn down or ask for changes in any proposal that comes before them. We have virtually absolute control. I personally can't see where all this alarm over how many of these we have is coming from. It seems to me that this is a self-limiting thing that's going to be limited by the lines we have, the transmission lines and distribution lines, and we're not far from that limit already. I just can't see why we are so concerned about the volume of solar installations. The principle that a landowner gets to decide what he does with his land, as long as it's a legal purpose, it seems to me should be paramount. And as far as the rest of the county, the other sectors of the county, I can't think of any enterprise that could come into the county that has fewer downsides. I mean, this is non-polluting. There's no noise, there's no traffic, there's almost no employees, so we're not getting a bunch of school kids from employees that have to be educated. There's no water or sewer requirement. They pay far more taxes than the farming enterprises. They will, in my opinion, and some of the representatives have testified that this will, in the future, ensure our electrical supply from cyber attacks that take out electrical supplies over large areas. We'll be protected from some of that. So I have a hard time seeing why we're so enthused about these limits at this point in our process. Thank you.
Mr. Cornwell, could you repeat what you just said about some of the things that we could be looking at? You named off a number of things.
My memory gets weaker as the age
One was
goes
about the
on.
setback.
And just like in any traditional use, you can control it through setbacks from wetlands to avoid pollution of wetlands. You can set it back from high-growth areas or restrict it, limit it, or deny it in high-growth areas. You can set it back from primary or even secondary roads. You can set it back from residential areas, areas that are zoned residential. You've already got the waterfront overlay district that obviously it will not go in, but you can also set back from that district. You can come up with all sorts of restrictions for good reasons that are defensible, that would limit where these projects would go. It would not prohibit projects from going in the other areas of the county, but it would prohibit it or restrict them from going in areas that you decide they are not suitable, or they would impose an environmental or other possibility of damage.
Okay. Mr. Barnes, did you write those down as he was saying them before?
I think I'm on
Okay,
tape.
it did. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on tape.
Produce a wetlands map of your wetlands, produce an 800-foot map. Mr. Lee had mentioned number 5 in Mecklenburg County Comprehensive Plan. I think some of the planning commission members have just mentioned that that's reasonable, and consider setback from W1 as well.
I think that's something the planning commission needs to chew on.
I think we're looking for some then Route 3, then Route 3 with the vegetation. We need to look at that too.
Well, the vegetation increased buffering could be handled in the conditions on a special exception on a case-by-case basis.
Yes.
Couldn't they also increase the setbacks along Route 3?
Right.
In a condition?
You could, yes. Now, I prefer to be uniform so that one developer doesn't get 100 feet and some other
Right.
developer gets 200 feet.
Right.
I prefer it to be a uniform in the ordinance.
Right.
I guess, just thinking, Just a second. Just thinking, in my mind, 200 feet doesn't really bother me, but it's that I want it buffered. I'd like to see things buffered. Right.
It's in the ordinance.
But I think the
Yeah.
special exception should take care of that. I mean,
Yeah, you could specify exactly the trees, the distance between the trees in the condition.
Just
That's
as we,
not something we want to put in the comp plan for Route 3 then? The type of
I
buffer we
mean,
want.
you could, but you could take care of that now with a condition on a special exception.
Yes.
which we already have a pretty robust buffer. We didn't describe the types of plantings, but we did.
Yeah, you have, by all accounts, you have a very robust solar ordinance.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I have yet to see a solar buffer planted anywhere in the country that's adequate to a naturally grown, just let the forest grow back, seems to be a better buffer.
That is the best.
Yeah,
I mean, everywhere around here, you can grow loblolly pines, a 75-foot buffer of them, and in less than 5 years, it would be taller than way taller than the fence, and you wouldn't see it. Whereas if you plant ornamentals or some sort of landscape planting, that's gonna take a decade. And then you're gonna have to constantly maintain them because they're gonna die, and you're gonna have to replant them, and.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
what
that's
we
an
have
option
is
in the ordinance
presently,
right now. You can do either or.
And that's what I did with the hoverboard.
right, what we presently have, I have no problem with. It's just for Route 3. There's a certain type that I want to see there. Yes.
I would like to say,
That's covered.
because I do have reservations at 9 at 8 p.m., but,
Yes, sir. This is just for the two boards right now to discuss. Public input will be later on. Okay, thanks. All right.
Mr. Cornwell,
Yes, sir.
you mentioned earlier, and I took some notes, and I want to make sure I took it right and then elaborate on it. You said that you could do some agriculturally protected growth areas?
Yes, sir.
How would that be defined? Can you give me an
It'd
example?
be in the, you would draw them out in the comprehensive plan, just like you do the present growth area we have, which is Kilmarnock, Whitestone, and Irvington. You could also map out, and you would have to be you'd have to use, does Virginia Tech still do the forestry?
SLEAC,
Yeah.
Yeah, they
You could
do.
use that as a basis to go by, and you could draw that as an agriculturally protected area, and you could draw up standards for that, just like we have in our growth area.
I would hope we would look at that. I mean, I served on a committee, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago with Don. And our county has always stressed that we're a farming agricultural county. And if we don't do something to try to protect some of this farmland, the problem that's happening, and I hear what Mr. Chupp is saying, but I disagree with a lot of that. He was hearing from farmers who were looking to sell easements. So I think their basis was some of the information I heard they put out about the cost of things, and those things were just way out of line. So, but I do feel like that we need to do something to help protect as much farmland as we can, because we're losing generations that are farming are getting less and less. The average farmer's about almost 60 years old now. And that's moving on to another generation. They don't live here. So now they're not as concerned about keeping it in farming. So they're looking for the dollar is what they're looking for. So anything I think we can do there to protect the farmland, I know it's a person's right, and I don't want to, if somebody that owns farmland is adamant they want to do this, then I don't think we ought to turn that away, but I think we ought to do as much as we can to protect what we have, or we're going to lose the agricultural makeup of our county.
One of the things you said, Mr. Geese, that kind of goes against the people, just like you said, farmers are older now. They dying out. They are kids and all that. They're away from here, and they're not interested in farming. They can turn around and sell that farm to a developer, and he can build houses on that. We will put more stress on the county than the solar thing is, and that's what I think Mr. Chuck was alluding at. And that has happened in this county. That farmland has been sold and been developed, and now you got houses on it. So you can't, you're gonna protect that land from the solar farm, but you still, these kids and things that's moved away from here, like you said, they looking at a dollar. So, hey, the developer, he gonna pay me this, we gonna build 100 houses in there. So what puts more stress on the county The houses or the solar?
No doubt, no doubt, it's the houses as far as that. But we've got things there, hopefully, to protect that right now. I don't think we want to do things that try to encourage us taking our farmland away. Because once it's gone, I don't think it's gonna be there. I don't have the answer right now as to exactly what that is, but that's why I was interested in your comment there. You know I farm, so I'm coming at it from a whole different perspective, and that's why I feel like I'm probably on this board, but that's where I'm looking at it, and I just keep hearing everything that's taking farmland, and it's sort of like we're encouraging it, and I don't know what things we can put in place to try to keep that land there. I mean, we've done some very good things in the past with land use. We just put land use on forest land, which will help. Those things help, but I hate to see this county that's been a rural farming county. I've lived here all my life, almost 60 years, and I'm just worried that the next 30 or 40, we're gonna see it totally change. That's where I'm coming from with it, so.
We presently protect residential growth, residential areas, through the R1, the R2 zoning classifications. But most of the farming property is in agricultural zones, which it allows for uses other than farming. So we can go in there and look at the agricultural A1 district and maybe restrict the uses that are available in A1. Or we can create just like we have a growth area, we can also have a farming area, which, as part of the comp plan, which when a use is designed, is asked to be put in that area, we look at the comp plan to see if it fits that protected area. I mean, there are all sorts of options. You just gotta figure out which ones you wanna use and whose ox is being gored.
I would hope we would consider that in this process, because, you know, once that's lost, then we can't get it back, and everybody knows that. But I would just hope we would consider that, because everything else we've talked about here, I think, are very important parts, especially the setbacks from wetlands and those things. That's crucial, so.
I would say the good thing about something like number 5 is that when we get to the special exception process, this gives us some leeway. So like one project, you may need a 500-foot setback from a scenic view or from a historical property, but then on another one, there may be a large woodlands between that and the project, and you only need maybe 100-foot setback from those things. So having that kind of language with the special exception process kind of gives us a leeway, but it also gives us a mode and a method to execute these things in a way that can be defensible.
Some of that, not to jump in, I'm sorry, I wasn't elected. With that, Mr. Bellows, you could, since Chapter 6 is with you all but tabled, you could recommend that you might want to see that kind of language, send it back to the Planning Commission. You can't add it at your level. It has to go back to the Planning Commission. They could add number 5 and maybe some of these other aspects you're talking about, maybe some of the maps we're referring to, and then come back to you all. And I think you could do that in 2-3 months.
Yeah, short time.
Yeah.
Good idea.
What Jason is referencing there, I understand the only thing that worries me about that is who makes that final decision. I assume it's like Brian makes that?
No, we
No,
do.
you
In the
do?
special
Okay.
exception process.
All right, so if the board is made up of somebody totally different, all of a sudden, you've got a totally different direction, whereas if you've got it more built into the law there, into the ordinance, then that would not be as subject to the whims or the changes of the board. That's my only concern there. I hope I made it clear.
I understand that.
If it was part of the ordinance, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of the ordinance.
Yeah, changing your ordinance right now is gonna be harder, but we can do that as well. But I think you have an opportunity with your Chapter 6 to do something now that might make everybody feel more comfortable. The other thing you guys will have to address, and maybe you don't do it tonight, but is your 3 projects that are still in play,
Well,
how you wanna go with that.
The ordinance can be more definitive of certain things like setbacks, where the comprehensive plan is more language that's guidance in a way, like what I say in number 5, like there could be specific setbacks in the ordinance, but then there can be guidance from this where we can have some flexibility in those setbacks based on the special exception projects. We're not gonna approve it if you're not gonna say, move that thing back from more than 500 feet from, say, something like Christ Church in an instance, or some sort of other resource like that.
And as you know, if your ordinance and your decision is in conformity with the comp plan, you're gonna win a challenge.
Yeah,
That's just flat out the law.
and that's largely in part why we won the Dominion Challenge, because the comp plan language
Right.
very well fit that argument.
My electricity bill went up after that, did you?
Solar. So, I mean, the guidance that I would be proposing would be to look at language 5 and incorporate some of that language into the comp, chapter 6. Almost pretty much identical wording. I would just, after cultural, I would add historical.
Does the board have to make a recommendation at their next meeting and then come back to us?
Yeah, what they could do, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cornwell, at your January meeting, you guys could, since you've tabled chapter 6,
You could refer it back to the planning commission.
Yep.
And they could make some specific recommendations to you, or having sat through this discussion, you may already have an idea of what changes they want, and then you could take it from there and then send it back.
yeah. And then I could schedule that for February planning commission, and then it would be March back to the board.
No public hearing?
Well, it would be a public hearing for you guys in February, but what may occur, you've got 2 weeks before your meeting in January. You guys could flesh out some of that number 5 language, maybe some of these other ideas. And of course, I could begin to feed that to you guys on the planning commission level so that you can see it before it's scheduled for February meeting. I think you guys are familiar enough with it, it's not gonna be a big change, but, and I think there was one other thing in chapter 6 that you all wanted to tweak as well that might require new language, which would require another planning commission hearing. But yeah, you would have to hear it again, but I think, we've got a rezoning in February, so you have to have a meeting anyway, and then we'll be back to you guys in March.
The one thing that we may need,
But how is that gonna?
no, I was gonna say, the one thing that we may need direction on tonight is these 3 projects that are already in the queue. I mean, we've talked about how you can accomplish a lot of these things already, or, all of these things already through the special exception process with conditions. Mr. Cornwell says be consistent with your conditions.
Well, you be consistent, but
Yeah,
if they're in different locations.
right. Different rules may
could
apply,
change,
yeah. These projects that are in the queue, as we've been told tonight, they've expended, money, big amounts of money to stay in that queue. They've paid money to apply for the special exception, and yes, you have a year to act on it, but we need to,
That's good and all, but I don't think we should be pressured by that. I don't think we should feel pressured by that.
Well,
At the end of
that's-
the day, we're gonna pay for that anyhow. They're gonna pass that cost on to us.
well, that's why I'm
We're gonna
asking,
pay for it.
that's why I've asked the question for direction.
But on the same note, Jason, I think we gotta look at things, rightly and deal with people fairly. And those projects, 3 or whatever it is in the queue, we need to go and deal with them.
I think we should just let them move on through the process at this
Yeah,
point.
I mean,
Okay.
if they come up in January or come up in February, that's when we hear.
Yeah, and the 103 I had no problem with, except for,
Right, and like I said, you can deal with that through your conditions.
Right.
But I think what Mr. Cornwell was saying is if we had 2 projects on Route 3 and you increased the setbacks for one of them to 500 feet versus 250, then when you consider the second one should also be 500 feet to be
But you
consistent.
don't have that, you have projects scattered here.
Yeah, so
We're in good shape.
that,
Just move on.
that's the only direction I was looking for. The 3 that we have in the queue,
Brian, how far is the setback between Route 3 and where the Hubbard panels are?
It's huge.
That's about 900 feet, because I measured that when when that first came to the board in
Because
2018.
that's clearly far enough back to where it's not any impact on Route 3.
Yeah, that may be too far back. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there.
It does
Yeah.
impact, it
Yeah.
does impact Ockton Road, because you can clearly see them on Ockton Road, as you know.
Oh, yeah, down there, yeah, but they're planted the buffers, and,
Yeah.
and in the new project, I imposed a 75-foot natural buffer.
Well,
That's even
my,
further back.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not,
it's
it's
my,
not gonna
my
look any
opinion that
different
we
than
move
what
on
we
with
see
these.
now.
You want to put that in form of motion?
Yeah, I move that the 3 projects that we have already in the queue, that we move forward in the process with those process. It's 3, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's three.
Maryball Road, Sandale, and Harris Drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those three.
Yeah, those 3.
All right, any other discussion on that part? Are you ready to vote? Oh, you've heard the motion, all in favor said aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. So the unanimous vote.
All
for
right.
aye, okay. So we'll move forward on that. And, y'all, the board, you have a good understanding of what we're trying to do?
We'll wait to get directive from you. We'll assume that we'll be getting Chapter 6 back for possible revisions.
Yeah.
And we look forward to it.
That's exciting.
You had fun the first time, right?
Right?
And maybe look at Article 28 again as far as the setbacks, to see if there's anything you can do for consistency across the board.
Yeah, I think we can do that. And I think that's definitely, and I think, I'm not gonna speak for the planning commission, but I'm sure they'll agree with me when I say, I think we expected that in this first 6 months or a year, we'd have to
That's right.
tweak the ordinance a little
Yeah.
bit. So
Yeah.
I think we're prepared for that.
Well, the special exception was our secret weapon.
Yeah, yeah.
And it still is, but as Mr. Cornwell said.
We need to have consistency in how we apply that.
Yep,
And we're all in this together. I mean, all the counties are going through this.
Exactly.
I'm sure you're talking to Ronnie.
exactly,
Essex.
in Essex, yeah. I mean, all the counties are under the same
I
gun.
will say, as somebody who spends hours and hours a week reading the press and minutes from all over the state, I don't want to beat myself on the back, but we're doing a better job wrestling with it than some counties. Some counties are in disarray over this. So,
I feel like we are. This is my first
no,
meeting.
this is not bad. This is
Okay.
not bad. You know, you've had some big deals up in just in the last couple of weeks in Winchester and Augusta County and several other places where it's,
Yeah, and who knows, there may be something coming out of the General Assembly this year dealing with
Who
solar as well.
knows?
That's true. Yeah.
I think there were 100 bills dropped yesterday, so who knows what.
Yeah.
Brian, this
What
hosting
evil lurks.
capacity slide, maybe at our next meeting or when we get this back, we can flush this out. But I'd like to see that, and I'd like to see that, what I was trying to get to was overlaid with the substations. I mean, you listed them out by name.
it's good.
But if you could put them in the map with the capacity available, including, I like the, and maybe you just don't have it, but maybe you can pencil it in, down River Road, the Northern Neck Electric, because it's coming, it'll come over there sooner or later.
In regards to that, you say they're not mandated yet, but like, if I was a developer and I wanted to hook into one of those lines, am I not allowed to? Are they not doing it at all right now, or?
That's a good question, because I have had several people come to me, landowners who live down 354, who have asked what they'd be in for, and they've got copies of the ordinance, and one gentleman was, his whole entire property, it's a big farm land, but it's completely within the W1, and I told him, you know, sadly, you're probably not in for this, and he was pretty upset at that, but he did come back later and he said, well, it doesn't matter because when I talked to Northern Neck Electric, they're not interested.
Okay.
It's just like when we went back to that matrix of how the permitting happens. One of 3 different parties could be interested, but if the interconnection's not gonna happen, there's no point in proceeding, so. But like you said, and I think somebody in the audience alluded to, Northern Neck Electric, you're right, could change their mind, or they could be mandated in one of those 100 bills that was released. They could be mandated. The thing with Northern Neck Electric being a co-op, and I don't know a lot about that business, but they're buying their power essentially from Dominion, and then they're charged with the distribution then and the customer service of it. So it doesn't really matter to them who they buy it from. And some of those electrons are gonna be coming from Waller, because they're gonna go to Garner and switch back, so, would they need more distribution? They might. As I'm learning in this business, every year is different.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
So-
you gotta look into the future, because they may not tomorrow, but Greg White was adamantly against, we're not doing broadband, and now they're proceeding on broadband, so I mean,
Yeah,
things
that's
can
true.
change tomorrow with one person, really, so.
And I apologize for not being familiar with where the substations are down there. As y'all know, since 2018, I've been studying mostly Dominion's infrastructure, and I really, up until this point in my life, I haven't really paid attention to those big gray things behind fences, but now I do.
Well, do we have any other comments, questions, or whatever? Hmm?
We've beaten this one.
I think we have,
I wanna hear from the one out there, or if it's not open to the public.
So, you all have any comments?
No, sir.
All right,
We're good.
I'd like to take this time to thank you for meeting with us, so we can have a meeting of minds, and have an idea of where we want to go and how we want to get there. I thank you for the job that you've already done. You've done an excellent job.
Thank you.
You know, done an excellent job, so it just, this is basically a little tweaking, so we get a good understanding of how to handle these other lines, the transmission lines, and how we want this thing to be placed in the county. Not shutting anybody down, because landowners have a right, and we want to respect that right. But we also have a responsibility to the county as well, what we want it to be like, look like, and function, how it's functioning. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, well put.
I move for adjournment.
Okay, all right. Motion for the Board of Supervisors has been moved to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned.
All right, motion, you want to give us a motion?
I make a motion that would adjourn.
All in favor, get
Got
up
a
and leave.
motion on the table, all in favor?
Aye.
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 I was disappointed tonight that you didn't have no public